that Envy Center's major objective is to generate awareness on various environmental issues. And we thought we can take this opportunity to generate awareness on climate change as we are celebrating, as we are observing Earth Day tomorrow. You all know that what is the theme of Earth Day, restore our Earth. But as I say, many of you are my students. I know, as I always tell you, that actually we don't really need to restore Earth. Earth will take its own way to restore itself, and it will be like through a process of evolution. But problem will be we may not be there in that process of evaluation because we have caused some damage, and that damage is going to harm us than Earth, because Earth has its own process to restore herself, and in that process, many species may get extinct, and we, the so-called brainy Homo sapiens, may not be there in long run. We will not be able to survive. So we need to understand that we have to restore Earth, not to help Earth or not to cure the damage what we have caused for sake of Earth or nature, but we have to restore Earth for ourselves, for our existence. So with that understanding, let us understand that what are the problems of climate change. We have already studied in a brief manner that what is climate change, its impact, and but today we are very fortunate or very lucky to have expert scientist who is very dynamic and who has got great experience in this field. So let us hear from her that what can be done that before we reach to the point of no return. So we have discussed this many times, right? What is point of no return and what can be done, and many things we have discussed. But today we are really fortunate that we have one scientist who has done actual research in this field from almost 2 decades. So let us hear from her what is climate change and how it is going to impact us, and mainly what is our role. Okay, usually we talk only about problems, we never talk about solutions. So let us also understand that what we can do. And if you remember, during our like 1 year back, during this corona pandemic, when it had started, we also discussed that how this pandemic has taught us that yes, earth can be restored because pollution levels were gone down, GHG levels were gone down because of some some period, because of lockdown. So it is possible, we had seen with facts and figures, but at the same time we understand that we cannot go for this lockdown for a long time. And that time we had discussed, yes, we cannot go for lockdown, but definitely we can slow down. Okay, so let us introduce me. Welcome Dr. Indu to this forum. And let me tell you, like, it is a big introduction about her. Indu is a principal research scientist, leading adaptation and risk analysis vertical at Center for Study of Science, Technology and Policy. She was formerly a consultant scientist at the Center for Sustainable Technologies, Indian Institute of Science, Bangalore, for more than 2 decades. Her major area of research and policy advocacy include climate change, forest, ecosystem services. She has focused her research on various dimensions of climate change, like mitigation, assessment for land use sectors, greenhouse gas emission inventory in land use sectors, then climate change vulnerability, assessment of, sorry, there was some problem. Assessment for forest and agroecosystems, adaptations to climate change, forest ecology, and citizen science. She is an expert for the UNFCCC, a member of Commission on Ecosystem Management of the IUCN, and forestry and climate change consultant to the United Nations, the World Bank, and other multilateral and bilateral agencies. She is a contributing author to Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change. You people remember we have discussed about IPCC and UNFCCC. So now we have a member who has already worked with them. So please listen to her carefully, and you can also ask your queries to her. So she has published several papers, and her introduction is so big that I'll share with you. And I now invite Dr. Indu to give a talk.
Thank you, Maya. You could have cut down on the introduction. I didn't have an issue. Anyway, thank you. Thanks for this opportunity. And I'm extremely happy to be here a day before the Earth's Day. So it's a wonderful opportunity that I'm getting to interact with students who are actually the future of tomorrow. I think that the thinking, it's not just awareness. There is something more than awareness that's needed to restore the earth back, or rather, set things back to normal for life to continue as it is. Definitely for yourselves as you grow older, and more so for the next generation and many more generations to come. So I'll quickly share my screen. So just to save the bandwidth, when I'm speaking, if everyone's okay, I can switch off the video because you will anyway be seeing the presentation. And as and when required, I can switch back the video, of course. I'll keep it on.
Sure.
Yeah, sure. Okay, so like Maya was saying, that a lot of you who are attending this meeting, I'm sure if you're students as part of the curriculum that you are going through, or even if you are not students, if you're kind of working professionals or even general public, I'm sure climate change is one issue that is a lot discussed in the media day in and day out. And of course, off late, we hear about the Uttarakhand forest fires. Then we had the Australian forest fires, and then there was flooding events. So on and so forth. So there is not a day which goes by when we do not see anything that is being covered by the media or any other blogs, articles, a whole lot of focus on the issue of climate change. Now, what we will do today is, the science is something that all of you are aware of, so I'm not going to spend much time on the science part of it. If anyone is interested, you can always reach out to me for more discussions on this, even if we cannot discuss here today, right? So, but I'm going to be focusing more on the impacts, the risks, and finally the solutions, including what you and I can do to make this world a better place. So, just to kind of set the context, we all know this is school science, right? The greenhouse effect. Now, the greenhouse effect, just to kind of put things in perspective, let's just quickly brush up our school science for that matter, right? So we all know that sun's energy, sun's light energy kind of hits the surface of the earth. A lot of it is absorbed and some of it is reflected back. In fact, one thing I think we all need to remember is that if this absorption was not happening, then the temperature on the earth would not have been congenial for life to exist. It's only because of this greenhouse effect that the temperatures on the earth is something that is able to support life. So it's a well needed like we talk about transpiration or photosynthesis and things like that, which becoming transpiration is a necessary evil or something. I remember my school textbooks, right? So whatever, I mean, it's a required scientific process that actually allows life to exist on earth. Now the question is, what went wrong? Where is it that the change came in, that everybody said, okay, this is anyway a natural process, so why are we worrying about this, right? So let's kind of try and understand that perspective. Now what you see here in this particular graph that's plotted is for the past 400,000 years, right? So you see the carbon dioxide concentration in the atmosphere. And what you see interestingly is that it was anywhere somewhere between 280, then it comes down to around 150, 180. Again, it peaks and it goes up around 280 or above. And then again, there is a cycle. So there is an increase and decrease, which has been happening continuously over the past 400,000 years. Now, for centuries, please note, atmospheric carbon dioxide had never been above this line. And this line is the 1950 level if you look at the average. Now, what we see is that this period, which coincides with zero, is actually 1950, 60 and beyond. Now, the CO2 concentration shot up quite drastically beyond this point. Now, why is something that you may all have studied about. It's because of the industrial revolution. You know, people started in the West, there was development, there was a whole lot of energy being consumed, and constructions happening, which led to a lot of emissions, which kind of shot up this CO2 concentration above the levels that was never seen in the past 400,000 years. Now, if anyone is wondering how did people actually measure CO2 concentration in the past 400,000 years, way back then the answer is, this kind of data comes from analyzing the ice cores. Now, in the Antarctica, you have these ice cores, and in these different ice cores, which are embedded at different depths, there are air bubbles trapped inside the ice cores. Now, glaciologists, what they do is they extract these ice cores, and then they also extract the gases within these ice cores and analyze them for the concentration of different gases. Now, what they deciphered from this kind of measurements is where we get this information from. So it very clearly says that it was much, much lower than where we overshot post 50s and 60s. Now, if you're wondering, okay, on the one hand, I'm talking about gas concentration, and I also talked about global warming, right? So if you're wondering how these two are connected, just have a look at this particular graph. On the lower frame, you see the temperature, Antarctic temperature that's plotted, and above is the CO2 concentration. Now you will see that they are going more or less hand in hand. Of course, there is a lag that you will see between the peak of concentration in the CO2 and the temperature increase, because it's not an immediate effect. But however, they more or less coincide over the past 800,000 years. And now, after that, after the 60s and 70s, it overshot, and it's actually more than 400 now. This is a slightly older plot. Now we are sitting at 410 or a little more than 410 parts per million concentration. So that's where we are today. And this very clearly establishes that these two are interconnected. So just to kind of add more to this argument, let's look at the past 1,000 years of temperature change, CO2 concentration, and carbon dioxide emissions. Now, what you will see here is the temperature that's changed, which is shooting up beyond a period, right? And you will also see atmospheric CO2 concentration and CO2 emissions. Now, all of these are following the same pattern. Now, either we can argue that, okay, it's just coincidence, which is highly unlikely, or we very clearly see patterns that one is the reason for the other. So the CO2 emissions leads to increase in CO2 concentration, and in turn, we see this increase in temperature, which is what is being recorded. And this emissions is because of multiple reasons. One is use of fossil fuels, which goes into all the sectors. It could be transport, it could be energy, it could be waste, so on and so forth. And also the other component is what we call as land use change. It's basically to do with deforesting land, cutting down trees, converting forests, and changing the land use into, say, agriculture or infrastructure, like for example settlements, right? So all of these is termed as land use change. So these are clear evidences that it is this change in the climate that we are experiencing is what we call as anthropogenic or human induced. We are the reason for this particular changes that we are experiencing is very clearly established. Now let's just get into a time machine for just a moment. All right. So let's see what the time machine is going to see. Now, this is from NASA. These are, these are animations, but based on actual measured or observed data sets. Now, let's look at global temperature. All right. So now when you look at the global temperature, what you will see here in this particular graphic is that it's a color coded map which will show how the surface temperature has progressed since 1884. Right, I'm going to play it. Please keep watching. Now this is your color code. It starts from -1 and goes up to 4 degrees. So right, this is the temperature difference as it's been plotted here. So I'm going to play it. Keep watching and keep observing. You can look at India if you want, even or the entire globe. Pay attention when it starts turning yellow and red, and look at the year it happens. The change becomes much more drastic in the last 30 years, as you will see for yourself. So there we are. And this is where we are today. So we are in a much, much warmer world, as it's very clearly evident from this particular, animation or graphic or whatever you want to call it, that you see. So it's a warmer world. Now on this site, you can go and explore for yourself. You can see how sea level has changed, how the glacial melt has changed, and also the CO2 concentration has changed. So you're free to go and explore, but it very clearly establishes that we are in an extremely warmer world than never before, right? So it is definitely a cause of concern. Now, where are we? How has it changed? Let's look at some numbers now. Now, the global average temperature as compared to the middle of the 20th century is what's being plotted here, right? 1880 to about, this is for 2019, right? Now, what you will see here is that when you compare it to the 20th century, these were much cooler years, cooler decades. But as you move towards the 70s and 80s and beyond, there's been a consistent increase in the average temperature all through the 20th century. It was either 0.25, 0.5, 0.75, or even higher as we come along. 1 degree and more is what we are looking at today, right? And also what you see here is the temperature. Just don't look at the change, just even look at the trend. You will see that 1851 to 1980 is the baseline. You compare it with a certain period, right? Minimum of 30 years. Now, please do remember that the seasonal change, year to year change in temperature, like for example, previous summer versus this summer, or 3 years back versus this summer, is not climate change. That is climate variability. Now, if you talk to any climate scientist, we call it climate change only if we see consistently a trend, an increasing or a decreasing trend in the temperature. That is what is termed as climate change. So it is a minimum of 30 years. People talk about a 50-year period or even 100 years, but it's never lesser than 30 years. So what you see here is a consistent increase in the temperature. Even if you look at the absolute temperatures, it's just been increasing. Now, one more thing I would like to draw your attention to is that this is a global average, which means to say there are many regions of the world which have experienced much lesser or much higher temperatures over the past many decades. All right, so that's very important to bear in mind. And what have we seen because of this change? We've been witness to, I'm sure all of you in this group have been witness to 10 of the hottest years on record globally. In fact, even 2020 is one of the hottest years, which is not plotted in this particular graph, but that's again one of the hottest years on record globally. So which means to say that with every passing decade, every passing year, temperatures are consistently increasing, and the global warming is actually a reality which you and I are experiencing. Now that's about the surface temperature, the land surface temperatures that we talked about. Now what about the oceans, right? Water also kind of absorbs heat. Now, yes, it does absorb heat. And what you see here is that how the ocean temperatures have again the heat content, not exactly the temperature, the heat content in joules, how it's increased at different depths. Now here again, you see a pattern of a consistent increase in the ocean heat. Now, why should we worry about ocean heat? Because there's going to be obviously increased evaporation with more heat in the atmosphere, and there is going to be increase in hurricane and typhoon intensity with warmer oceans. Changes in the weather patterns is a cause of concern, and of course, rising sea level because of thermal expansion is another thing that's a cause of concern. Now, when you look at marine life, of course, they are also going to be impacted. Coral bleaching is one example that all of us have read about, right? Because of accelerated ice sheet melting and then the increased heat, there could be coral bleaching. And secondly, one more important thing is that remember your school experiments, take a beaker of water and then put salt. There is a saturation point that we all do that experiment and study at school. So now oceans are similar, they're absorbing so much of carbon dioxide that their capacity to sink in more kind of declines with more and more of absorption of the CO2 in the oceans. So which is why we need to be concerned about the changes or the increases in temperature. So ocean temperature is also something that's drastically increasing with global warming. Now, what about sea levels? Now, another thing that people have done or scientists have done is that they've also looked at how the sea level has changed over the past many decades. And what you see is again the same pattern. Sea levels have also increased, be it because of Greenland and Antarctic ice sheet melt, or because of thermal expansion, or because of mountain glaciers melting. All of these put together, you see a consistent increase in sea levels all across the world. Globally, this is what is the trend that you see. So now we saw sea level rise. Now that how does the water come in? Obviously, it has to be because of glaciers melting and declining sea ice that's happened. Now what you will see here is we saw increase in temperature, we saw increase in ocean heat content, and what you see here is both in the Arctic and Antarctic region, decline in the ice sheet, the expanse of the ice sheets. Now pay some attention to this particular picture out here. Now this is Antarctica. What you see is the ice extent on a particular year, which is 1979. During September, this was shot. And people have gone back and measured the extent of sea ice. And what you saw in 2012 was only so much. Now let's see what it looks like today. Let's go back to the time machine and let's look at the sea ice. Now, this is 79 when it was so much. I'll directly get into 2020. This is what we are sitting with. Now, this is a huge loss in the sea ice. Now, this sea ice melting, obviously, it's water, right? Now, it has to go somewhere. And where does it go? Obviously, that's why you're looking at sea level rise. You're looking at more and more areas being inundated over time, right? So again, this is a larger impact of climate change that we see. Now, overall, because of these different factors that are changing, we see increase in the global disasters. More and more disasters are being reported under these various categories. Now, all you need to pay attention to is the extreme weather. When we say extreme weather, we are talking about heat waves, we are talking about extreme flooding events. and you see that this red curve, that this particular patch is consistently increasing over a large time period. And look at flooding events. The blue, the bottommost, are floods. Now, floods are also consistently increasing over the past many years. Now, all of these result in loss of lives, loss of infrastructure, and loss of even food production. So, which is why I think people have to be concerned about climate change as an issue, which is something that's impacting all of our lives in some way or the other. Maybe not directly because we are not farmers ourselves, or maybe we are not, people working in the forest, or we are not people dependent on forest products. But however, there is a whole lot of, ripple effect, as they say, which passes down to even you and me. So now let's look at these impacts of climate change, right? Now we know what's happening with the climate system. We know where we were and where we are. We also know more or less the reasons as to why the earth has warmed, right? So now let's look at the impacts. But before we get into the impacts of climate change, let's look at how it has changed in India, right? Because that's our area of interest. That's where we all reside in. Now, the Ministry of Earth Sciences, late last year, they published a report for climate change in the Indian subcontinent, and they've looked at historically how climate has changed for India. And what you see is that India's average temperature has increased by about zero point 0.7 degrees over the period 1901 to 2018. Similarly, sea surface temperature has also increased in the Indian Ocean by about 1 degree. Ocean heat content has also increased in the past 6 decades. The summer monsoon precipitation, or the Kharif rainfall, which extends between, say, June, July, August, and September, right, for most of India, has declined by around 6% over a certain period. And notably, they say the decrease has been over the food bowl of India, which is the Indo-Gangetic Plains, and the Western Ghats, which is a biodiversity hotspot, right? So there is a significant decline in the summer monsoon precipitation. And it also concludes that both the frequency and the spatial extent of droughts, which means no drought affected areas, are increasing over the period 1951 to 2016. They are seeing droughts being reported even in certain districts and taluks, which in the past never were witness to a drought. That is what the spatial extent increase means. And even in the northern Indian Ocean, the sea level rise is reported at a rate of, it was 1.06 to 1.75 during 1874 to 2004. But what you see in the last 2.5 decades is an accelerated increase of 3.3 millimeter per year. Now, this seems like a small number, but it is not a small number at all. In a worst case scenario, climate scientists are talking about as high as 3 to 6 meter increase in sea level. Now, 3 to 6 meter increase in the sea level means many cities in the world, be it New York, be it even Mumbai for that matter, and countries like Bangladesh could disappear from the map, the world map that we are seeing today, because large land masses could be completely gone underwater because of the sea level rise, if that becomes a reality, right? So that's why everybody, policymakers to scientists to general citizenry, is concerned about climate change as an issue. And of course, cyclonic storms are also increasing. Now, this is all for India. Globally, we saw the trends. The trends in India are no different. It is the same even within India. Now, what can we expect because of this, which we've already experienced, is extreme heat events. They are being reported in Rajasthan. They are being reported in the Vidarbha region of Maharashtra, in some parts of Tamil Nadu, in the northern districts of Karnataka, Rajasthan, of course, a whole lot. And of course, Delhi, heat waves, we keep reading about them. We also are witness to intense rainfall events. Now, when we say intense rainfall, see, there are certain regions which are very heavy rainfall regions, but that does not mean that rainfall happens in, say, 1 day or 3 days. It is distributed in a certain way. Now, if all that has to happen over, let's say, 3 weeks, happens within 1 week, that's an intense rainfall. It leads to flooding because the systems are not ready to cope with such heavy rainfall. The soil gets eroded, the crop could be lost, and so on and so forth. And there could also be high winds that are associated with heavy rainfall events. Now, when I say high winds, extreme wind, strong winds, think about electricity transmission, the wires, right? You have a lot of these electric poles getting uprooted, transmission wires getting impacted, windmills being uprooted, solar PV panels being completely flown away because of high winds and storms. So that's a reality. And of course, poor air quality is another thing that people from large cities keep experiencing. Now, as a result of all this, we will experience all these different things that I already talked about. And of course, health impacts, heat waves causing deaths, making living conditions unbearable is something that people in many parts of India, definitely globally and even within India, are experiencing year after year and more increasingly in every single passing year as we go along. Now let's look at what it means for food production, whatever we are talking about, right? So let's look at the key sectors, at least the most important sectors, and see what it means. What does this climate change mean for different sectors? So the most important thing, the food that we all need to survive, right? There are going to be large scale impacts of climate change. And according to one study, by 2030, 9 out of the 10 major crops globally will experience either reduced or stagnant growth rate in the way they are, and which means it has implications for price. Now, price is something that you and I pay. Even if India imports food, if the prices are high, then obviously we end up paying more. So it has, it indirectly impacts people like you and me as well, right? So there are studies. Now, such kind of studies are there even for India. People have looked at rice and wheat and how it impacts, how climate change impacts the production of these two. Now, very recently at C-STEP, we did a study where we looked at how climate change will impact groundnut production, maize, and sorghum production in the future. And what we see is that the production efficiency, as they say, it could reduce anywhere between 10 to 30% because of higher temperatures, because of variations in the rainfall in the future is something that we conclude. Now, all of these again have impacts on food availability, food access, the way we utilize food, calorie intake that goes in, and then the food stability is also going to be impacted because of impacts of climate change. Now, we all sit in this zone. We need food, we access food, we utilize food for our own nutritional purposes. Now, all of these are something that's going to change under a climate change scenario. Now, why is this changing? Now, this is closely interconnected with pollination. Now, there are umpteen number of reports that have come in which talked about climate change disrupting flower pollination in different species, bees losing their habitat because of climate change, butterflies, actually the habitat and behavior, they are also pollinators, they being impacted, and then climate change actually disrupting the bee population, so on and so forth. If pollination doesn't occur, where is the food? You cannot imagine food production, right? It cannot happen. Without pollination, there is no food production. So which is why we are all going to be impacted. So that's about the food crops. Now let's look at things beyond food crops. Now, there was a report way back even in 2019, which talked about 5 favorite foods you're about to lose to climate change. Let's see what they are shortly. It also talked about, chocolate not tasting any better in the future because cocoa production or quality of cocoa would be impacted. There were, reports on tea being impacted. So what you will see in the future is that we might not get good chocolates, which most of us love. That's like a comfort food for a lot of us. Some of us, our day doesn't start without a cup of coffee or a tea. That's likely to be impacted. Banana is something that's going to be impacted. Avocado would be drastically impacted. And for many of you youngsters, of course, with COVID, you may not be having your weekend parties and stepping out, but I'm sure once this weans away, this phase goes off, you would obviously be getting together with friends for a cup of, for a whatever, for a beer, right? Now, beer taste could also be impacted. Now, this is something you and I very nicely relate to, right? Every single thing that we eat is probably going to be impacted because of climate change. Now, these are just few examples. Now, that's about agriculture. Let's move on to forests, right? Now, forests, of course, are important as, habitats for a whole lot of purposes. They are, that's where many of the rivers have their origin. So it's the watersheds that we are talking about. Maya, can you hear me? Actually, it started raining here. So I might want to close.
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah,
fine.
audible.
No, I can hear you clearly. Yeah.
Oh, fine. If not, I can close the window because in Bangalore, you never know when it starts raining, and it just started raining.
No, we can hear you very
Yeah,
clearly. No
Okay,
issues.
excellent. Thank you so much. Now, coming back to the impact on forests, as I was saying, forests are like, they are like they're important for multiple reasons. Now, because of climate change, there could be increased susceptibility of these forests to pests and diseases. Now, what all climate models are talking about is a more wetter future, which means there's going to be more rainfall in the future. That means there is going to be much more moisture, which is a fantastic breeding ground for pests and diseases, which is what all projections talk about. And also forest fires, because like the one that you're seeing in Uttarakhand, because of extended dry spells. Now, as I said, because of climate change, you may have heavy rainfall events. You may even have increase in rainfall, but unfortunately, that's not going to be distributed uniformly. So either you will have very high rainfall events and then there is a gap. There is no rain for an extended period, which means it becomes a dry spell. That is bad news for agriculture. That's bad news for, in summer, that is extremely bad news for the forest also, because you have, on the one hand, you have high temperature. Secondly, you don't have rain for an extended period, which means there is a lot of inflammable material that is there in the forest. So which means, it could be man-made fires. In India, we do not have very big natural fires. Most of the fires are man-made fires. That's, carelessly somebody walking through the forest, he lits a BD and then he just throws the matchstick, or you put the stuff somewhere, it just catches fire. So which is a cause of concern. Now, also because of climate change, it could lead to changes in composition and distribution and productivity of the forest. That's because of the changes in what they call as the phenology, the flowering pattern, the fruiting pattern that is brought about by changes in temperature as well as rainfall patterns. So now we see that the net primary productivity, interestingly, productivity, if you're looking at only timber production, that's likely to go up over the next few years or few decades. That's what the modeling says. But however, there is a limitation of these models. They do not account for what we call as nitrogen limitation in the soils. Now, for good productivity, you need sufficient amounts of nitrogen also in the soil, which the model does not account for. So if you consider that, then probably we might not actually achieve the kind of production increase that these models actually show. So there is a whole lot of uncertainty with respect to the way the systems are going to be impacted. And of course, if there are more pests, more diseases, more invasive species, then you might actually be losing a lot of native indigenous species, which are being used by many forest dependent communities. Now, these communities depend on these produce for their subsistence or for their livelihoods. They even sell it either in local markets or commercial markets. One, it provides them food, medicine, and a whole lot of things, or they could actually be marketing it and having a livelihood out of it, especially in the tribal zones. So given that the impact on climate change will move much more beyond just the forest ecosystem. It's not just about tree species, it's about the entire ecosystem. And you have, when I say ecosystem, all the kind of services that stem from the forest ecosystem, because of its impact on the entire habitat, will leave a lasting impact on many more things that we don't see here. Now, humans is just one component. What about the microorganisms? What about the birds? What about the small mammals, large mammals that exist in these forests? All of these would also be impacted. Now, let's look at biodiversity itself, right? Now, we looked at forests, we looked at agriculture, which are like the big key ecosystems that we relate to or which we can understand. So when we look at the impact on biodiversity, again, as I said, because of shifts in the distribution of plants and animals, shifts in the seasonality of rainfall, the way the temperature is, and also changes in the timing of reproduction of animals and plants, there's going to be large scale impacts. And if there are people who are avid bird watchers in this group, you will definitely agree with me that if you have been following migratory bird patterns, if you've been going back to one place to see them, I'm sure maybe even you have seen that they either arrived a little late or a little earlier over many years that you have been avidly watching. And there have been reports of these across the globe as to how this has changed. Now, one more interesting thing that you see is that the minute we say plants, we think of them as a static system, but then we also, in science, we say that plants have actually migrated across an altitudinal gradient. Now, how does this happen? This is because of seed dispersal, establishment, etc. Now, what has happened is that in the Himalayas, there have been studies that certain species which were found at, say, 1,200 meter above sea level or 1,500 meter above sea level, over a period of time when they monitored along an altitudinal gradient, species that were never found between 1000 before about 1500 meters, they have seen them establishing themselves at 1800 to 1000 meters. Now, why? That's because the climate there is suitable for them now, or maybe the climate at the 1500 meter elevation is no more suitable or the best one for them. So obviously it's fight for survival. So even plants kind of migrate across an altitudinal gradient. And even animals, of course, they migrate in search of food and other reasons as well. So which is something that's been reported all across the globe when we are talking about biodiversity and its impacts because of climate change as well. Another thing that is extremely important, which you and I experience or will experience as we go along, is the impact of climate change on human health. Now, this graphic actually kind of summarizes all that's potentially going to happen. Let's look at some few details, right? I talked about heat waves. So with heat waves, obviously, the living conditions are going to be very difficult, and drinking water, which already is a problem in many cities in India, could become much more scarce because the groundwater tables are already depleting or because of overexploitation. Now, another thing that we don't relate to much, but is because of climate change, because of increased heat, is mental health. Increased heat also causes certain mental health issues, as it's been reported by many scientists who work on the health sector. So now that's related to heat waves, less water in the system, etc. Now let's look at the other extreme, which is flooding. Now, because of flooding event, there are going to be obviously, diseases like diarrhea, because there's more water, waterborne diseases are going to be increasing. And secondly, vector-borne diseases like malaria, dengue, etc. will also increase. Now, if you're wondering how, just as you know, for these vectors, they need a moist environment for them to breed. Now, when I say there is increased rainfall and flooding, that means there is more water in a particular region for extended periods, more than what it was before. So obviously the breeding window, as they call it, is going to expand. So more time is available. So which means the extended period would expose humans to these vectors and diseases that many of these vectors are likely to carry. Now the same applies even to vertebrate pests that impact forest trees and also agricultural pests for that matter. Then moving on, air pollution and related diseases like asthma could also be increasing. We're seeing it, it'll increase, it'll worsen as we go along if we continue to be doing what we are doing today with the earth. And of course, malnutrition because of impacts on food production. Now, food production, as I said, could be drastically impacted, adversely impacted. So less of food available, less nutrition available. So that could also lead to malnutrition. So these are the kind of some of the health impacts. It's not an exhaustive list, but some of the health impacts, which is something that you and I connect or we understand very well. Now, that's with respect to the natural resource sectors and the humans. Let's look at the infrastructure. I mean, the minute we say infrastructure, we think, they're like huge buildings, big bridges, large dams, large thermal power plants. This, nothing will happen to them. But unfortunately, even those would be impacted because of flooding and erosion. So most infrastructure assets will be at high risk because of flooding due to heavy rainfall and rising sea levels. Now you take any thermal power plant, it's usually close to a water source because you need cooling power. Now with increased heat, the demand for cooling increases. Now invariably, increased heat is coupled with a drought or a dry spell. So where are we going to get the water from? Now if thermal production is going to go down, obviously electricity generation and then its transmission and it reaching consumers like you and me would be impacted. Now because of flooding, if you look at it, high temperature extremes have an impact on telecommunication electricity networks. Similarly, even heavy rainfall can impact transmission because the conductor sags. Any wire, when it sinks a lot of water, it could sag or it could touch a green tree. There are short circuits. So obviously, there are multiple risks that could arise with increased temperatures, flooding, or even heavy rainfall, and also strong winds, which I already explained about solar PV panels, transmission wires, wind plants, all of these actually being, damaged because of all these extreme events that we are talking about. So on the whole, if we sum up, there are great risks because of climate change, and it's already happening, be it increased cyclones, be it glacial melt, flooding, drought, water scarcity, food production being impacted, or forest fires, or pollution, or even vertebrate pests and the health impacts. All of these are happening, and we are already experiencing it. And as we move forward, it's going to increase. Now, the magnitude is definitely going to increase according to all studies globally. And even for India, the Ministry of Earth Sciences report very clearly says that in the future, by the end of the century, temperatures could increase by 4 degrees centigrade if we do not do what, when I say if we do not do, it's not just we people within India, because climate change is it's transboundary, it's also intergenerational. So given that, there has to be some level of effort that has to happen all across the world. So now let's move into the solution part of it. How do we address what has the world been doing? It's not that we have to start today. There is quite a bit that is at least being talked about, and to some extent being done also around the world. Now, from Maya's opening talk, I did get the point that a lot of you, at least the students in this talk, are familiar with the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change, which is, and then the Kyoto Protocol, and maybe even the IPCC, the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change. Now, all of these scientists, if you know the history of it, everything started at Rio. That's when, everybody got together, scientists, politicians across the world, and then said, okay, there's something very wrong with the climate system, and we are the reason for it. And so we need to do something about it. We did the damage. Let's see how we can slow down the damage. They thought of reversing at that point in time, but over time they've realized you can't reverse it. All you can do is slow it down. So how do we do it? Now there is a two-pronged approach that's being advocated. One is what is called as mitigation, which is avoiding the unmanageable, which is by reducing the flow of greenhouse gases into the atmosphere and increasing the storage of carbon. I'll talk about this in a bit. The other one is adaptation, which is changing the way we live, which means you have to manage the unavoidable. Now, why I have placed with intent, I have placed adaptation underneath mitigation, primarily to indicate that you cannot do away one from the other. There is need for both mitigation and adaptation as we go into the future. Now, the reason being that, even if you decide to reduce the flow of greenhouse gases into the atmosphere, let's think of an imaginary situation that when all countries in the world, right, every single person is not going to do any activity which is going to emit even a single molecule, a single gas molecule into the atmosphere, which is going to increase the concentration of greenhouse gases. Now, if so, we might have this thinking that, okay, if that happens, oh, that's good. Then, we will kind of be static, and slowly over time, we can reverse the process. Unfortunately, it doesn't happen that way. That's primarily because the world is, as they say, committed to climate change. When I say committed to climate change, it's because even if we don't emit today, there have been gases that have been emitted in the past. Now, all of these are up there in the atmosphere, and these have a certain global warming potential, and also the lifetime of these gases are varied. And secondly, it's not like it's emitted and immediately there is warming. It's a complex system that's in play. There you have the carbon cycle, you have the nitrogen cycle, you have the water cycle, you have a whole lot of interconnected cycles happening, which all put together is what we experience as climate change. Now, given that there is some level of warming that's bound to happen, which means you need some insurance against that change, which is what adaptation is all about. Now, in fact, adaptation is actually the need of the hour. One needs to kind of do a lot to adapt to the changes that we are already experiencing and which we will experience as we go along. Now, talking about mitigation, which is to, if you remember, it is to reduce the flow of greenhouse gases and increasing the storage of carbon. So what is it that we can do? Now, as you will see here, in different sectors, you can't do away with one. You need to work on all the sectors, be it power, industry, transport, buildings, waste, forestry, or agriculture. Everything needs to be done. You need to do a concerted effort to reduce emissions from these. Now, when it comes to energy supply, etc., we are talking about energy efficiency improvements, which India is already kind of moving in that direction. Shifting to renewable sources of energy, many of you might be aware that with respect to solar, India is doing extremely well. We're kind of outperforming what we wanted to, targeted to. And there are also discussions on switching from coal to natural gas, even hydrogen is something that's being talked about. And of course, the other one is to do with forestry. Now, forest is a very interesting sector. Now, this is a sector which is a cause of emissions when it is cut. When the forest trees are cut, there is a lot of emission that happens. All the CO2 that's trapped in the trees gets emitted. But however, when you actually grow a tree, this is again back to your school science. Photosynthesis is the only process which captures carbon dioxide. Now, that's what we are talking about here. Increasing the storage of carbon primarily means increasing your green cover, growing more trees. Now, of course, it's a different issue that there are a whole lot of new technologies that are being discussed. They're talking about carbon capture and storage, nuclear energy also being one way of becoming a cleaner energy source, etc. Now, carbon capture and storage, these are all nascent technologies. There is a lot of research that still needs to go in, and also there is the risk of the unknown, as they say, because you can capture, let's say you have these huge barrels into which, at the source you capture the gases that are coming out, emissions that are coming out, you store them. People talked about dumping it on the floor of oceans. Now the fear is, what if there is a leakage? It could be devastating, right? So people are still kind of, worried about the unknown, what might happen in the future. So they're testing it, they're kind of exploring these options, but a lot still needs to be done. But these are the core areas where you can actually cut down emissions or capture the carbon. So this is about mitigation. Now, so basically, if I have to sum up mitigation, we need to invest in renewable energy. We need to divest or do away with fossil fuels. Think about, as individuals, we can talk about more of public transit, riding a bus, car sharing. Yes? Yes, please.
No, by mistake, maybe. Please mute your mics, please.
Okay. Okay. I thought someone was asking me a question.
No.
Anyway, I'm almost done with this. You will have time to interact with me. Just another two slides is what I have. Then we can have a discussion. So yeah, so basically we are talking about consuming less, wasting less, but at the same time enjoy it. And also people are talking about putting a price on carbon. If you emit, pay the price for it. And of course, as individuals, we all have the right to vote or make the choices. So that's something we really need to do. One more important thing, which we don't usually connect, is dietary changes. Eat for a climate stable planet is something that the world is talking about. Now, I mean, it's easy to say eat meat-free meals, but for people who are meat eaters, I think it's a very difficult choice to make. But however, one can reduce the consumption of meat. When they say meat, it's primarily red meat that they are talking about. And if you're wondering how meat will contribute, it's the life cycle. Now, in places like, say, Brazil, they have huge ranches where they breed cattle for meat, right? So now what happens is that there is a whole lot of forest conversion that happens. The land conversion causes emissions. And then, the feed for these livestock is also something that is a source of emission. Livestock themselves are a sources of emission. That sector, animal husbandry sector, because it emits methane and nitrous oxide to some extent. So given that, and also the meat is processed, and then it travels a lot of places. It travels a long distance, particularly in US and Europe. So the carbon miles that it takes in, the carbon footprint of meat is very large, which is why they say you need to kind of cut down on meat. The dietary changes is something that people say that would contribute positively to climate change, in the sense it will reduce the emissions. So, and of course, don't waste food is something that we all hear about. That's something we need to kind of follow. So that's about mitigation. Now, adaptation, what is it that we can do with respect to adaptation? As you see here, you need to adapt in all sectors. There's not a single one which you can ignore, right? So you need to adapt. So now we talked about these different events that could happen under a climate change scenario. So broadly speaking, there are 4 things that we can do. One is, we have to improve the building codes and standards. We do have the Griha, Griha rating that goes in India. But beyond that also, we might want to think. Then, of course, low impact development. We are talking about managing the storm water, harvesting it, rainwater harvesting. How do you utilize it? How do you recycle it? That's something that people are talking about. And also, most importantly, development of early warning systems and disaster planning. Now, we need to move from disaster management to disaster preparedness. That can happen only if and only if we have adequate early warning systems, and that can actually contribute to people actually being forewarned and doing the right thing. And of course, policy and lifestyle changes are things that we need to do. Now, in summary, there are 10 big things that people talk about, which includes your early warning to capacity building. Now you and I can do, but there is a lot of capacity building that also has to happen in the policy makers or the decision makers who actually implement in the government. And also, the way our constructions are. Now, more importantly, when we are talking about urban planning, now there is a lot of focus that's coming in on what they call as nature-based solutions. Now, a lot of these nature-based solutions have a lot of co-benefits. In the sense, you harvest water, but you also have trees, which means it's mitigating, it's capturing carbon, but at the same time, it is also providing a barrier for the rainwater to not hit the ground directly, which means the impact is less, the soil erosion would be less, and then there is some level of water actually being sucked in by the pavement if they are pervious pavement. So there is a whole lot of discussion around what they call as nature-based solutions. Now, this would require a separate talk in itself, but just to kind of let you know, there is some thinking that's already there with respect to how do you use nature for solving the problems of, say, climate change, be it, buildings, be it the way we manage our urban systems, flooding, or even droughts and other things. So this is my last slide. I will leave you to kind of read to. This is put together by Grantham Institute, where they say there are 9 things that each of us can do as individuals. So with this, I'll stop, and I'm open to any questions or any clarifications that would be needed. Thank you.
Thanks, Dr. Indu. That was really a very wonderful and informative talk. And now I request, and I definitely know that now students will take more interest because you had told them that their chocolates will taste differently. And you nicely explained by using the time machine concept that what is going to happen in future and how it is going to impact our health and agriculture. Now this session is open for you all. Please ask questions. Please feel free to even unmute and ask questions.
Ma'am.
Yes.
Hello, ma'am. Can we call the climate change as a population-driven climate change?
Sorry, I didn't hear you. Can you come again?
Ma'am, can we call term climate change as population-driven climate change?
It is human-induced. Population-driven, not necessarily because of increase in population. Because of increase in population, the ripple effect of it, the demands on, say, biomass, the demand for energy, demand for water has increased. So yes, it is human-induced climate change. In a way, population-driven, yes.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Feel free to ask questions. Yeah.
Ma'am, I have a query with you. I have read about somewhere that we are actively striving away from investing in eco-friendly things, due to capitalism. Is that true?
Well, that's a subject of, in the sense, to some extent, maybe it is true, but I don't think I am in the right place to comment on it. But we cannot say that generally there has been no investment on eco-friendly investments are not happening. In a small way, it is happening, but maybe what we need is much more large scale. That has to become viable. See, the problem is many of these technologies, when you have to scale it up, it is not viable. So I think, students like you, if you're from the engineering background or if you're technology driven, from that background, you will have to find ways of looking at not just piloting it. You can test it in one place, but if there is a demand for, let's say, one whole district, how do you cater to it? So you need to make viable solutions which can be scaled up rather than a pilot. When I say a pilot, it's just, as a trial, we do it in one place. That won't work. So technology has to become that, anything for that matter. I hope I answered your question.
Yes, ma'am.
And to add to this, as such, I feel that I don't blame any particular government, but the governments are not taking this as a priority issue.
Right.
Mostly, yeah, climate change or any development. They, if you even take example of the Sardar Sarovar Dam or environmental clearances, like any government is not giving much priority to environment. So, what is his name? I forgot. Kishore. What you are telling, Kishore, is partially right, because governments are not taking initiatives for, not a single government or not a single political party has agenda in their or manifesto, in their election manifesto, where they talk about environmental protection. And even what all laws we have, they are not getting implemented.
That's true. See, if I
Yeah.
may add to that, the problem is with partly with the way we do science and communicate science also. Some of you are going to be, researchers and scientists in the future will have to keep that in mind. Doing science is great, but I think communicating science in the right manner is another need of the hour, because you need to speak the language people understand, right?
Right.
If I say, okay, climate is changing, they'll say, okay, so what? I mean, मेरे political career तो 5 साल का है, 3 साल का है. What? How does it matter? But then the minute connected with investment, how it's going to impact the investment that they are making, or how it's going to say benefit say X number of farmers. Agriculture is a big sector. So the minute we say, okay, whatever you do, if you implement say micro irrigation, which is going to save water, which is also going to help people, farmers reap a better harvest, which will benefit X number of farmers, increase income, say 1.5 times or something, then every person wants to leave an impact, leave their legacy behind. So they would probably see it in a better light. So I guess if students here who are becoming scientists, you need to keep this in mind, that doing science is great, but at the same time, communicating it in the right manner in a language that people understand is very, very important as well.
And there has to be also pressure from people on politicians to implement all these laws.
Absolutely.
Right?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yes.
And for that, awareness generation is very important.
True. Very true.
Otherwise, like you see, the young Greta is telling everyone, but then Trump says, yeah, this is he is not even, he was not even ready to understand, admit that global warming is a truth, or he used to say it is a myth. But now we have Biden, so we have some hope.
Absolutely.
So I also, after all students ask questions, I also wanted to ask you that what will be the future of Paris Agreement, because Kyoto Protocol was almost failed. So, what is your opinion on Paris Agreement and how it is going? And if you can throw some light on that, let others ask question, then you can take my question.
Okay, definitely.
Ma'am?
Yes.
Yeah.
Ma'am, this global warming and pollution have been causing a serious impact to our Earth in these recent years. And most of the governments have started promoting EVs and electronic vehicles and things like that.
Yes.
So even despite that, most of the electricity is still produced from fossil fuels like coal. So why are our governments not investing on bringing the prices of renewable electricity production down, like wind energy or solar energy? Solar energy still continues to be on the expensive side in terms of maintenance and things. So why isn't anybody tackling this issue in the root level rather than at the?
I mean, you are right in a way, but the thing is, all of these, they take time. It's not like it can happen immediately. The production, there are parts. There have been discussion about solar PV, certain components, and also batteries, etc. Lithium batteries which were imported. How do we kind of move it into production within India is something that is being discussed. Unfortunately, all this research and all this takes time. So think about 10 years back versus now, as you rightly said, solar energy then versus now. is something that is very different. You know, people weren't really talking, but now we are talking, looking at solar in a big way. India is kind of a leader when it comes to solar power and its implementation. So the price reduction is something, it will happen, but it takes its own course of time.
Thank
Subsidy
you, ma'am.
is not going to be the answer. You know, subsidy is something that's going to,
technology is not that way. Yeah, like it is not very cost effective. Like if you
true.
yeah, and another thing is like when we are comparing this fossil fuel with solar energy, when we are pricing also, we are not internalizing the cost on environment or society. So we feel that solar energy is expensive. So
Right.
unless we change that attitude, like we are not never internalize the cost on society and environment and health. So that is another factor, and technology has to be matured. Then only we can, like, it has to be cost effective.
Exactly. True.
Ma'am, how can we change the consumerism towards the eco-friendly products?
You have to change it. Nobody can change it. You and I will have to change it. So it comes at an individual level to begin with. So the answer is within us.
Yeah.
Ma'am,
Thank you, ma'am.
ma'am, I have a question.
Yes, please.
I'm doing my PhD in CSF. Just one question only. That is about the climate change, its impacts, everything you have said. My question is, has it filtered down to the lower strata, that is to the uneducated people in a more or less scientific way, so that they can also contribute a little in their own way? That is what I'm asking.
Okay. When you say lower strata, do you mean people economically lower, or you're talking about
Economically as well as educationally very backward?
Go talk to a farmer. You will know that he knows better than any of you and me what climate change is all about. So
Yeah.
yes, because they are the ones who are actually feeling the brunt of this change that's happening. So
Right.
they understand it very well. They have their own indigenous knowledge. It's not that they aren't doing anything about it. They do their own tweaks, their own changes that they are doing, but that's not enough for them to tide over the losses, the buffer the losses that are happening, which is why I think governments, technologies, planning, policies, etc., also need to contribute positively to buffer those losses.
Okay, thank you, ma'am.
Yeah.
Thank you, ma'am, for very nice, knowledgeable, and informative session. I am Dr. Zamandar from Maharashtra.
Yes, sir.
My question is that day by day there is extreme increase in the plastic as well as the electronic waste, e-waste.
Yes.
The role of e-waste, I think, in the global warming impact of the e-waste.
See, waste in general, maybe people have done research on e-waste also, but I personally don't have much knowledge about how much it contributes to emissions. But I'm sure if you just look up, see, people who are wanting to know what are the emissions from the different sectors for India, you can go up and look up what is called as the national communications, right? If you Google national communications and MOEFCC, you will find a report which is basically a carbon budget for the whole of the country at a sector level. How much is each of the sector emitting? So that's something you can refer to. So that's Dr. Samantha. So unfortunately, I won't be able to give you more details. But as you rightly said, yes, it is contributing quite a bit.
Yes, thank you, ma'am. But till there is no recycling in India, I think so.
Maybe. I don't know.
Okay, thank you, ma'am. Thank you. Very nice.
Yes. Thank you.
Ma'am, as far as recycling, is there any change? Is there any need to change the process of recycling of waste products?
See, as technologies emerge, there might be different ways of recycling waste, but recycling has to happen anyways. So now people are finding, alternate uses for many products. I mean, even plastic is being used for making roads, clothes, etc. People are kind of, experimenting with a whole lot of things. I mean, think of, I'm sure, Maya spoke to you about this. Lantana was an invasive species. Who thought, that, they will make furniture out of it, right? So now it's a big industry in some places. Small scale industries are cropping. So that way, I think over time, you might have different ways of utilizing waste, but then recycling will happen. It will have to continue.
Yeah. And to add to this, that industrial ecology is a new concept now. Everywhere, like, in this industrial ecology, they are using waste of one energy as a resource material for another industry.
Absolutely.
So if you just search industrial ecology or circular economy or closed loop system, you will get lots of information about how, because of this recycling, instead of they are making use of this waste to make so many different things, like even energy production. And there are so many articles you might have seen that how they are using this plastic even to construct road.
Yes.
Yeah. So research is happening, but then it is in pockets, and we have to do it much more.
Thank you, ma'am.
Any other question? Yeah, please.
Hello.
Yeah.
Good evening, madam.
Good evening.
This is Ranjit Raut from Maharashtra.
Yes, sir.
As we are using technology for just like windmills and other techniques, for windmills we used to create the windmills and at the grasslands here, which is the habitat of the birds like great Indian bustard. And these birds number is going to declining day by day. Now they are near about hundreds only.
Yes.
And this technology is also giving crossing some nature barriers, and the wildlife causes some problems due to this technological things. What you can say about it?
What I can say is, technology as such is not something that's harmful. It's the way we use it. So the siting of the windmills, there is a need for, as Maya said, see, unfortunately in India, we have a lot of well-meaning policies. There is no dearth of policies in India, but the way actually implemented on the ground is the biggest challenge. Now, that is something where we need to see the change happening. See, there is a EIA that has to go in. So practically, if it is a truthful, if it's a real EIA that happens before citing the windmills, then obviously, it would not have come up where it is today. So now I think here is the question. So we need more people, youngsters who are in this group, to take interest in these things. And also, not just, we need people in science, we need people in policy making who understand and appreciate all these things. So we're not saying everybody needs to become a scientist. We need people who are developing technologies. We need entrepreneurs. We need policymakers. So make your choice. But then wherever you are, I think you need to be conscious of the fact that there is something that's happening which is going to impact all of us. And if we don't act today, then we're going to lose a chance. So I guess it's about implementation. So there is not much we can comment about. All of us know what's happening.
Yes, definitely, madam. Thank you. Thank you very much, ma'am.
See, and implementation also, unless you put pressure on, like I'm talking more like activists now than scientists. So unless, that as Dr. Indu said, we have got, we know what is science. We also have laws, but unless we implement them properly, unless there is a political will, we are not going to achieve sustainable development. And to achieve sustainable development, we should first of all, we need to generate awareness among masses, and then we have to put pressure on politicians. So we have to choose government which is pro-environment, which is promoting pro-environmental policies and which is going to implement pro-environmental policies. But now you see like environmental clearances, how it is happening, and the most of environmental impact assessment, that notification itself is getting diluted. So unless there is a mass awareness, unless we put pressure on government, what all research we do, it is going to remain in paper, and what all webinars we conduct, it will be just a discussion among us. So we have to generate awareness among masses, and we have to create pressure on government.
Any other question?
When there is any environmental impact assessment, there are public hearings. So we all are supposed to go, but very few we are aware about such a public hearing.
I mean, even if we are aware, the general tendency is, अरे हम जाके क्या करेंगे उस फोरम में, मेरे बोलने से क्या बदल देगा? So that's I think we need to come out of that thing. I think the youth have a huge convening power. So you need to become aware, you need to realize what's important, and then you as a generation will have to bring about that change.
Right. Any other questions?
Okay, if there are none, then let me talk about Paris Agreement that Maya wanted me to speak about. So many of you may be aware that there's something called a COP26 that's going to happen. That's in November this year. And there's a lot of background work that's happening across all nations. So now this Paris Agreement, it happened actually, it was signed in 2015, for those of you who may not know. And the important thing about the Paris Agreement was that the countries around the world, about 198 nations, submitted what is called as the Nationally Determined Contribution, or NDCs as it's popularly called, as to what they will do within their own countries. Now, these were just commitments, they were not legally binding. So the choice was for the country to either do it or not do it. Now, India also had three big commitments in addition to adaptation. One was to reduce its, fossil fuel use and, ramp up 30% of the fuel mix to be renewables. India has outperformed already. I mean, we're doing pretty well on that particular target. The other was to reduce the GDP intensity. Now, that's something that is happening. It can't happen overnight. The third was to do with increasing the forest and tree cover so that you create 2.5 to 3 billion tons of carbon equivalent. As I said, when you grow trees, you capture carbon, right? So they said we will create as much hectares of forest, which will be able to accumulate 2.5 to 3 billion tons of carbon dioxide. Can I? Now, what happened is that Paris Agreement happened, but then now all the countries, it happened in 2015. We are already in 2021. In fact, in 2020, the COP was about to happen, but then because of COVID, it got postponed. Now, all the countries are supposed to kind of submit a new revised NDC commitment, which is higher and above what people have already committed to, so that they can move towards the target or objective of the Paris Agreement, which was to stabilize the warming.
I'm not able to hear you.
Please unmute your speaker.
Sorry. Okay. Oh, so sorry. Okay, so now, in the Paris Agreement, there were certain commitments which have to be revised now by different countries. Now, a lot of countries are talking about what is called as net zero emissions or carbon neutrality. Now, there is a slight difference between climate
Network. Mahesh, I think there is some issue.
Hello? Someone,
Yeah, we can.
yeah, someone accidentally removed me from the meeting. Yeah. Anyway, not an issue. So now at COP26, all the countries who are signatories to the Paris Agreement are expected to what they call as ramp up their targets and submit them. Now the world is all watching, and countries, a lot of EU countries, a lot of even China have talked about reaching carbon neutrality by 2050, 2030, so on and so forth. Now, the whole world is looking towards India because India is one of the major developing countries, and they see India as a very important player in this entire climate negotiations. So they're hoping that India will also kind of commit to that net zero. But within India and different circles, there is a lot of discussion. But the government is very clear. They say they're not really going to commit to a net zero right away because they feel that there's something called differentiated responsibilities. They say we are not the ones who caused climate change. The major emitters are the developed countries. So they say that all the other countries need to do their bit, post which we will come into the game, is what they are saying. So now with US back in the Paris Agreement, because they had withdrawn. Thankfully, thanks to Biden, and we are back. US is back in the table. So people are hoping to see something very big happening in COP26. I mean, if it doesn't happen, then I think it's going to be the collapse of the entire system because the Kyoto Protocol is over. So now, unless the Paris Agreement takes new shape, the future looks pretty bleak. But then countries around the world, politicians, scientists, we are all watching keenly. We're hoping that something good comes out of the COP that's going to happen. So that's in a nutshell, but everything is about net zero these days. The climate neutrality is something that people are talking about. To simply put it, climate neutrality is, how much you emit, you kind of accumulate it back, you sink it back also. So your emission and your sequestration or sink creation is equal. So it's a net zero. So that's something that countries are talking about. We'll have to wait and watch.
Thanks.
Yeah.
Thanks for explaining it so nicely.
You're welcome.
Yeah. Because my students, they are studying this carbon neutrality. They have studied Bhutan's example.
Nice. That's really
yeah. Any other question, or shall we close it now? Okay, so it was really a wonderful or informative session, Dr. Indu. Thanks for that. And so many things my students learned today. And most importantly, they learn now what is their responsibility, how they can, because it is related to everyone. Like, it is not somebody else's issue. It is related to our health. It is related to our agriculture. It is related to our food security, and it is related to their chocolates.
Yes.
So they are not going to take it very lightly. And hope every one of you take this climate change very seriously, because see, now people are dying because of corona. In last lecture, you must be remembering that even because of air pollution or climate change, so many health incidences or people are dying. But only thing, we are not taking it seriously, or they are not giving so much publicity, or they are not directly linked. So we are taking this or air pollution or climate change very lightly, but this is equally serious issue. So let us take it seriously and bring some changes in our personal and professional life. to reduce our greenhouse gas emissions or carbon emissions, and whichever way we can help combating climate change. And also, I again tell all of you to be safe in this corona pandemic, because second wave has come. So don't take it lightly. Anyhow, all the classes we are taking online, but just be safe and be healthy. And now I request Mahesh to take over.
Yeah, good evening all. I'm Dr. Mahesh, Program Officer of Envy Center. On behalf of Envy Center, Amrita Vishwavidyapeetham, Coimbatore, I would like to thank our chief guest, Dr. Indu K. Murthy, for delivering the wonderful presentation on climate change, its impacts and solutions, and enlightening us with her knowledge. And also, I would like to express my sincere thanks to Dr. Maya Mahajan, our center coordinator, for the support and guidance and for moderating the session. I also extend my sincere thanks to all the participants who attended the webinar and made this program a grand success. Thank you all.
I would like to place my thanks for this opportunity to interact with you all, although virtually. Thank you very much. Well, I just want to leave you with this thought. For corona, there is a vaccination, but for climate, there is no vaccination. So we need to do our bit, right? So you cannot immunize yourself from climate crisis. All of us are vulnerable. All of us will be exposed to it. So let's do our bit. Happy Earth Day, a day for me. I think every day should be Earth Day. So give a big shout out that we don't exist. So stay safe, and it's wonderful. Hope to be at your own center sometime soon, so I can actually meet you face to face and talk to you. Thank you very much.
We love to have you at our center, and thanks for that wonderful message of that vaccine. That's really impactful.
Thank you. Bye, everyone.
Bye.
Thank you.
Thanks, Mahesh. Bye, Maya.
Bye, Indu. Thanks again. Thanks for your time.
Sergey, please send feedback link, no?
Yeah, I have shared the feedback link. Already I have shared the link in the chat box.
Okay.
Okay,
We
sir.
will be
Thank you.
conducting such programs, and you will get emails very regularly. Thanks for participating.
Okay, ma'am. Okay, very nice. Thank you. Thank you.
Hope you enjoyed the session. You may leave now. Thank you.
Yes, ma'am. Wonderful.
Thank
you. Yeah. Thank you.